to FNN News, FNN News Network, and I am your host, Sibel. First up in news on the Oromo Liberation Army. The OLA located in Makaharaway in the Mandi district in western Wallaga zone ambushed Prosperity Party forces traveling in one single military truck as well as 3F trucks today, killing all on board. The OLA in the Southern Zone Oda Adola Brigade also reported ambushing enemy troops in Soduraba that were patrolling in 14 cars, killing 7 and injuring 8 on January 11th. In its continued operation, the Odadola Brigade reported attacking enemy troops in a third ambush, killing over 9 and injuring an unidentified number of Prosperity Party forces around the town of Wadara. In a search operation it conducted on the road between Negele and Finfine on January 12th, the OLA captured Prosperity Party Security and Communication Officer Niguse Wako Genale around the Wato area of Gorodola district. The OLA also reported capturing another unidentified enemy combatant and a Sino truck that belonged to the Prosperity Party on January 12th. The Oda Adola Brigade also reported ambushing enemy troops, killing 7 and injuring 3 today around the town of Wadara in the eastern Guji zone. In news on Oromia, a new report out from the Addis Standard describes the severe conditions of drought and food shortage currently being experienced in multiple areas of the Borana and East Bale zones, as well as the Fentale Wareda in the eastern Showa zone and the East Hararge zone in Hawigudina, Borkadimtu, Gumbi, Bordode, and the Mieso districts of the Western Hararge zone located in eastern Oromia. All of these areas now currently beginning to experience more and more severe water shortages and drought conditions. We'll put up some images obtained by FNN News here. So according to residents of some of these waredas that were interviewed for this Addis Standard piece, many said that the drought is taking a very severe toll on both the farming season and also on people who raise cattle in the area. According to these residents, the situation has also been aggravated by some border disputes with the nearby Minjar Shenkora Wareda, which is over the border in the Amhara region. I'll read out a quote now. This is from Gadisa Barcho, who is the head of the Fantale Wareda's Disaster Management Bureau. He says, as quoted by the Addis Standard, all the 18 kebeles are experiencing drought, except for some that have the Awash River irrigation project running through. The drought is not severe now relative to other areas, but it is getting worse. In some areas, the shortage of water and pasture is forcing the residents to migrate. The situation is worrisome. We have assessed the impact of the drought and reported it to the concerned body. We are still collecting data. We don't have the final figures as to how many people are affected. And local authorities are also attempting to address the situation by setting up some local water distribution spots at health posts and schools where residents can go to get water that is safe for drinking. Some also say that many children and students are missing school or even dropping out of school to help their parents deal with the situation and find food and water. Meanwhile, some other families are fleeing their homes, whether that is due to the drought or the uptick in violence in the area that FNN has, of course, reported on thoroughly. And this situation is also worsened by inflation, as the price of cattle is rapidly dropping while food prices continue to go up and up. Here's a quote, another quote from that article from a resident of the Mayumuluke Wareda located in the East Hararge zone. People with low income are affected the most. We hear people saying support will come, but we have not seen any yet. Everyone is in need. We need larger support to survive this drought. Schools and health posts are on the verge of closing due to the water shortage. This is the worst drought I have ever seen in my life. So again, this is of course a continuation of a situation that FNN has reported on in the past. These rapidly worsening conditions of drought, especially now as the situation develops for people living in the western and eastern Hararge zones. In other news on the OLA, a new press release out from the OLA claims for the second time that Eritrean troops have entered West Wallaga, Kelem Wallaga, and other areas in the neighboring Benishangul Gumuz state to support Oromia state forces. We'll put that press release up here on the screen from the OLA/OLF. So here, reading from the press release, it states that having failed to retake areas liberated by the Oromo Liberation Army in Western Oromia, the ruling regime has redeployed Eritrean troops into West Wallaga, Kelem Wallaga, and areas in the neighboring Benishangul Gumuz state. And stating here that Oromia state forces and members of the Eritrean Defense Force comprise the majority of regime-affiliated troops in Western Oromia. Also, the statement says that airstrikes have continued in the region perpetrated by government forces. Eritrean forces first entered Oromia around April of last year, and shortly after their entrance into the region, reports began to emerge of extrajudicial killings as well as human rights abuses perpetrated against Oromo civilians by those Eritrean troops. In May of last year, the OLF put out its first press release addressing the subject of these Eritrean troops who have entered the area. We'll put that one up also here. Stating that it has tangible evidence that Eritrean troops had been deployed to areas including Horo Guduru, the Kelem Wallaga, West Wallaga, Guji, and Borana zones of Oromia, as well as the Metakel zone in the Benishangul Gumuz region. And this statement also alleges that those troops were killing, beating, or raping civilians and looting property. Most notably here, drawn attention to in the statement, was the reported murder of 7 farmers in the Sayonole district of West Wallaga on May 3rd of last year. And Ayantu News also reported later in July that more than 30,000 Eritrean soldiers were entering Oromia and were being transported through the Bole airport to the Dambidolo, Asosa, Jima, and Hawassa airports. FNN was not able to independently verify that specific claim about the airports. In response to that previous incident, Oromia regional government spokesperson Getachew Balcha actually appeared on the BBC and denied the presence of Eritrean troops in the region, stating that only Ethiopian National Defense Forces, Oromia Special Forces, Oromia Police, Federal police, and Oromia militias were in fact present in the region. And he also alleged that the attacks on civilians were in fact perpetrated by the OLA and TPLF soldiers who were dressed in the military garb of Eritrea, the official military uniform. He said, quote, "After they are under arrest, we find out that they are individuals who are not Oromo and can't speak Afan Oromo, posing as though they are fighting for Oromos. This is all an attempt to tarnish the reputation of Oromia regional government." So that's a quote from this interview with the BBC. The BBC interviewed Getachew Balcha, the Oromia regional government spokesperson, denying any involvement of Eritrean troops. However, in an attempt to verify those claims, the BBC also interviewed an anonymous resident of the Horoguduru zone, the Abe Choman Woreda specifically, who did implicate Eritrean forces as the perpetrators of violence against civilians in the region, and said, here's a direct quote, "They are freshly deployed to the area. They beat and detain civilians at random and commit robbery in a manner never seen before." And a large number of Eritrean troops have also been definitively identified in the Tigray region since the very beginning of the conflict in that area of Ethiopia and the civil war. So in March of last year, Prime Minister Abiy announced via Twitter that he had had discussions with Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki, and he put out a press release following those discussions. Here's the press release here that he put out on Twitter, stating here in the press release that all Eritrean troops would be pulled from the Tigray region. The statement here claims that Eritrean troops had, in fact, only entered the conflict after the TPLF fired rockets into Asmara in Eritrea in an effort to, quote, prevent further attacks and maintain national security. Now, those rockets fired by the TPLF, that was back in November of 2020, they hit the Asmara airport, and of course, Ethiopian government claiming that they were fired by the TPLF. And the TPLF also did partially take responsibility for that. However, Tigray's regional president at that time, Debretsion Gebremichael, said that Eritrean troops had actually entered Tigray up to a week before those rockets were fired, even as Eritrea continued to deny any involvement. So again, this chain of events in which, first of all, in November, Eritrean troops appear to have entered the Tigray region before those rockets were fired. About 6 months later, in March of 2021, Prime Minister Abiy comes out and announces that he has talked with the Eritrean president, and they have decided to pull Eritrean troops out of Tigray. However, that's only days after the first acknowledgement from Prime Minister Abiy that Eritrean troops had even been involved in the first place. So Abiy also in this, he also addressed widespread claims heard from civilians that Eritrean troops were committing atrocities against civilians, saying, quote, "The Eritrean government has highly condemned it and said they will be accountable if any of their army participated in this." And he made that statement during a parliamentary address that came just days after his first confirmation of the presence of Eritrean troops in the Twitter statement. However, there have been multiple accounts from international journalists stationed in Tigray, including journalists from Reuters and AP, citing civilian accounts of a widespread presence of Eritrean troops throughout the Tigrayan region, who are identifiable to civilians there from their obvious foreign accents when speaking the language Tigrinya, which is the Tigrayan language, even though many were still dressed in Ethiopian uniforms. Here I'll put up now an article that came out a while back. This dated from about a year ago from the AP, detailing accounts of from Tigrayan civilians. One in particular, the first source who is quoted here, is in fact from Colorado in the US, and gave accounts of how Eritrean troops were stealing jewelry from civilians, essentially. She witnessed this when she went back to visit her mother in Tigray before returning again to the United States. So many of these accounts detailing that Eritrean forces were raping women, killing civilians, looting hospitals, and blocking food and medical aid in the area. Now, months later, in June of last year, Debretsion Gebremichael told the Africa Report that the TDF was still engaged in conflict with large numbers of Eritrean troops. He said, according to that report, during the last 2 months, we have been fighting 8 Eritrean divisions at the same time. Still, they did not manage to penetrate our defense. Now, one Eritrean division does not dare to move alone. They have deployed together in 3 or 4 divisions. And the former Ethiopian chief of staff and a senior TPLF military leader, Lieutenant General Tzadkan Gebretense, also told the same news source, the Africa Report, that TDF troops that he commanded were engaged in fighting with Eritrean forces. He said that the Eritrean forces have 2 options. Quote, the first one is for them to quickly leave Tigray, go back to their country and prolong their time if they have any left, or to stay in Tigray and try to finish the war here, which will quicken the EDF's death. So going forward, we're going to be watching closely for any more evidence or news that comes out showing the influence of Eritrean troops in this ongoing war and their presence in Oromia. Of course, a confirmed presence in the Tigray region, and now there is evidence to suggest they may have entered Oromia, and they may once again be involved in the ongoing civil war in Ethiopia. So we'll continue to update our audience on those ongoing developing stories. That is all for today. Thanks again for watching FNN News, FinFine News Network, and I am your host, Sibel.